this evening was a mistake. Go home. Then why did you look at me like I mattered?
Because caring about you makes you the one weakness I cannot afford.
The espresso machine hissed over the low jazz. I tucked a stray hair back, balancing a loaded tray, until my knuckles went dead white from the cramp. 6 hours into a double shift, and my feet were already screaming inside my busted sneakers. Marco called out table 7 from the register. I gave a tight nod, forcing a smile through exhaustion that weighed on me like a wet coat. The floor was absolutely packed for a random Tuesday, air hanging thick with roasted espresso and sweet vanilla. My uniform clung to my spine, drenched in sweat from running endless laps. Here you go. I set the last cappuccino down, keeping the foam perfectly intact. The suit at the table barely glanced up from his screen, offering a flat grunt, invisible again. But then the whole room shifted. The front door swung open. A sharp gust of autumn wind hit the floor, crawling straight up my bare arms. The chatter died instantly. The entire building just stopped breathing. I turned around to see what caused the sudden drop. 2 men stepped inside first massive walls in custom suits, sweeping the cafe with cold, mechanical focus. They locked down the door. Muscle, not club bouncers, but the lethal kind that triggers an animal panic. Then came the boss. Even without the guards, he would have owned the space. He did not ask for the attention, he just took it. Wearing a charcoal suit worth more than my yearly rent, dark hair perfectly swept back, framing a face built out of sharp angles and ruthless symmetry. But his eyes pinned me down pitch black, tracking everything. Violently calm. The stare of a man who never hears the word no. I snapped my head away, feeling completely exposed, certain he could map out every unpaid bill and hidden fear I carried. My fingers shook slightly as I cleared dirty mugs from a booth. Ellie, Marco hissed, materializing beside me so fast I nearly shattered a saucer. That is Enzo Corelli. The name meant absolutely nothing to me, and my blank expression proved it. Jesus, you do not know, Marco whispered, his eyes blown wide with raw terror. The Corelli family owns half the city. They do not run ads on billboards. If you catch my drift. A cold spike drove straight down my spine. I had heard the local ghost stories. Everyone had. Rival businesses burning down at 3 a.m. City judges suddenly flipping their rulings. Dark whispers about the bodies of people who pushed the wrong boundaries. What is he doing in our shop? I asked, dropping my voice to a breath. Marco just shrugged. He shows up sometimes. Takes the corner table by the window. Wants the exact same drink every single time. He shoved a damp rag into my palm. And you are serving him today. I balked. No way. Why me? Because Sophia called in sick. And you are the only one left who pulls his shot right. My stomach twisted into iron knots. I have absolutely no idea what he drinks. Double espresso. Splash of almond milk. 0 sugar. Sparkling water on the side. You have to use the Sicilian beans. Never the house blend. Marco gave me a desperate look. Please, just be polite. Keep your eyes down. Do not stare. And you will walk away, fine. Before I could even argue, Marco abandoned me and ducked behind the espresso machine. I dragged in a heavy breath, smoothed my apron, and marched toward the back corner, where Enzo Corelli sat. One guard hovered nearby, the other stood out front, watching a blacked-out sedan, up close. The gravity around him felt so much heavier. He took the seat with his back against the brick, giving him a tactical, dead-center view of the entire floor. Heavy silver caught the light on his wrist as he scrolled his phone. Every movement was terrifyingly precise. I cleared my dry throat. Good afternoon. What can I start for you today? He lifted his head. Those pitch-black eyes dragged over me in a slow, calculating sweep that felt entirely invasive, burning right through my skin. He did not smile. He skipped the fake politeness entirely. You are new, he stated. His voice was a low rumble, carrying the faint, smoky edge of an Italian accent. It was not a question, but I answered anyway, just covering Sophia's section today. A tiny shift cracked his stone face, maybe annoyance, maybe genuine interest. I see, double espresso. Almond milk, Sicilian blend, with sparkling water on the side. Yes, sir, coming right up. I pivoted away, desperate to escape the intense pressure drop in his orbit, but his voice hooked me. What is your name? I froze. Giving it to him felt like signing a dangerous contract I could not read, but walking away felt like suicide. Eleanor, I managed. Most people say Ellie. A single nod dismissed me. Walking back, the weight of his stare bored into my spine, tracking every step I took. All the hairs on my arms stood up prey, pinned by a predator in the brush. Hiding behind the espresso machine, my hands visibly shook while I ground the beans. Stop it, I thought. He is just a customer. A lethal mob-connected customer. Sure, but still just a guy drinking coffee. I brought the heavy tray over. He was murmuring rapid-fire Italian into his phone, his voice harsh and commanding. He killed the line the second I got close, sliding the device right into his jacket. I set the cup and water down, completely terrified of accidentally brushing his skin. "Will you need anything else?" He stared at the dark liquid, then up at my face. Total silence stretched between us. I felt entirely stripped bare. He was analyzing me, filing away every single nervous twitch, every frayed thread on my collar. "That is all." He finally broke the quiet, cutting me loose with a nod. I practically fled back to my section, begging for the mindless routine of clearing dishes. But for the next hour, my eyes kept drifting to his shadowy corner. He drank in total isolation, making short phone calls, watching the room like a hawk hunting for weakness. Once, our eyes locked. His face was a brick wall. I snapped my gaze straight to the floor, my cheeks burning with a strange, sudden heat. When he finally pushed his heavy chair back, he slid a crisp $100 bill right under the saucer. $100 for a $5 shot. He walked toward the exit, stopping right beside my shoulder. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said it so deliberately, making my name sound heavier, almost dangerous. Then he stepped out into the street, his muscle instantly forming a wall around him. The entire cafe let out a shaky breath the second the glass door shut. "Holy shit," Marco whispered, popping up beside me. "He never speaks to the staff." "Never," I gave a weak shrug, fighting hard to keep my breathing level. "He just wanted a name." "It is nothing." But the words tasted like a flat-out lie. A cold dread settled deep in my gut. It felt like a tripwire had just snapped the start of a very dark game I never asked to play. 72 hours later, I was locking up completely alone. Marco bailed early for a family emergency, leaving me to survive the final hour and pull the iron gates. The dinner rush died down to 3 college kids, nursing dead Ladas, hiding behind glowing screens. Heavy rain hammered the front glass, bleeding the yellow streetlights into wet, blurry streaks across the pavement. Scrubbing the counter for the 3rd time, I kept checking the wall clock, counting the agonizing seconds until I could crawl into my tiny apartment, hit the hot water, and rip these cursed sneakers off. The brass bell on the door chimed. I looked up. An apology already loaded on my tongue. "Sorry, we close in 15. The apology choked straight in my throat. Enzo Corelli filled the doorway, rain catching the light on the shoulders of his heavy black coat. This time, he brought only one enforcer, who anchored himself by the glass, while Enzo walked toward my register. The college kids stiffened, feeling the sudden drop in room temperature, and buried their faces back in their laptops. "Good evening, Eleanor," he said it casually. Pretending mafia bosses casually strolled into coffee shops near midnight. "Mr. Corelli," I stammered out, completely shocked. My brain even found the name. "What can I get started for you?" He scanned the empty chairs. "You are locking up soon." "In 15 minutes. "Yes, but I can still pull a shot if you want." He weighed the offer, then slowly shook his head. "I actually came here to return something." He reached into his dark coat pocket, pulled out a thin silver chain with a tiny crescent moon. My bracelet, the heirloom my grandmother handed me right on her deathbed. The one I had not taken off in 5 solid years. I let out a sharp breath, my fingers flying to my bare wrist. I had not even realized the metal clasp broke. "It must have slipped off while you were bringing my espresso the other afternoon." He held the silver chain out. "One of my soldiers found it by the table after we walked out." I reached out, completely thrown by the simple gesture. His fingers grazed mine as he dropped the silver into my palm. His skin was burning hot. That tiny touch sent a vicious shock straight up my arm, jarring. Electric, deeply terrifying. "Thank you." My voice actually wavered. "This really means absolutely everything to me. My grandmother left it to me." The granite lines of his face softened just a fraction. "Family bloodlines should be protected." I gave a mute nod, fumbling the silver chain around my wrist, fighting the broken clasp with shaking hands. I looked back up. He was just staring down at me, radiating that same crushing, quiet power. "I should let you finish closing up." He finally stepped back. "Thank you again for bringing this back. You really did not have to." A faint smile touched his lips. Perhaps I just wanted an excuse to return. Before I could even process what that meant, he was already turning away. At the door he paused, glancing back over his broad shoulder. "Be careful walking home in this heavy rain, Eleanor." Night shifts always felt dangerous, but just like that, he vanished into the rainy dark, with his massive shadow of a bodyguard. I stood completely frozen behind the counter. My grandmother's bracelet felt incredibly heavy against my wrist. How did he know my route? Was he watching me? That realization should have terrified me. Instead, my chest tightened with alarm, and something else I refused to name. Next morning, absolute panic. I woke up late, after tossing and turning through dreams of dark eyes and rain-slicked pavement. I tore across my tiny apartment, grabbed my work uniform, and dragged a brush through my hair. Halfway out the door, I caught sight of a sleek envelope on the floorboards, slipped under the gap sometime before dawn. No name, no return address, just heavy cream paper stamped with a wax C. My fingers physically trembled, breaking the seal, revealing a card covered in sharp, elegant ink. Eleanor, I need a private barista this weekend. Your boss agreed to lend your services. A car collects you Saturday at 7 p.m. Formal attire required. E. Corelli. Not a single request. 0 question marks. Just pure, cold expectation. I collapsed onto my worn couch with the card, heart hammering against my ribs. He actually went to Marco, borrowed me like a spare espresso machine. That kind of arrogance should have made my blood boil. Yet, right beneath the anger stirred a deeply treacherous curiosity. What kind of event? Why pick me? I was still sitting there, when my phone vibrated with a message from Marco. Sorry, couldn't say no to Corelli. He pays triple for Saturday. You okay with this? I stared blankly at the screen. The reality finally sank in. This was never a polite request. Men like Enzo Corelli simply do not hear the word no. Plus, triple my cafe rate meant making next month's rent. Shaking, I typed back a single word okay. I had absolutely no idea that slipping that envelope under my door was Enzo Corelli dragging me into his underworld. Taking that non-invitation was the very first step. A move that would completely rewrite everything I thought I knew about power, fear, and desire. I never realized one simple okay meant crossing a line of no return. Saturday hit way too fast, twisting a permanent knot of anxiety deep in my gut. I stood helplessly staring at my meager closet. Formal attire required, right? Because I regularly attend Mafia galas on a barista's paycheck. An hour later, I pulled out the only decent piece I owned. A simple black dress from a wedding 2 years back. Hardly high fashion, but elegant enough, dropping just beneath my knees. I paired it with my only heels black strappy sandals that pinched my toes but completely sold the look. My grandmother's bracelet gleamed against my wrist, the silver crescent moon catching the dim light. I rubbed it with my thumb, desperate for something familiar. At exactly 7 p.m., an unknown number lit up my screen. Outside your building. I checked the mirror one last time, barely recognizing the woman staring right back. I wasted way too much time getting ready, pinned my unruly auburn hair tight, applied my makeup with surprisingly steady hands. My green eyes looked enormous, luminous against the dark mascara. Why did I even care? I was just serving coffee. That lie tasted incredibly bitter, even to me. Down on the curb sat a sleek black car with pitch black windows, totally alien in my rundown neighborhood. A driver in a sharp suit stepped out, pulling the rear door open without a single word. I slid onto ridiculously soft leather. The cabin smelled heavily of expensive cologne and old money. Half of me dreaded Enzo waiting inside. Half practically prayed for it. Instead, I sat totally alone as we merged into city traffic. Excuse me, I said, leaning toward the front seat. Where exactly are we heading? The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, taking my measure with cold precision. Mr. Corelli's residence. I swallowed hard, sinking deep into the quiet leather. His house. Not some rented restaurant or hotel ballroom. His actual home. That realization sent a sharp, thrilling shiver down my spine. Outside, city lights smeared past as my cramped neighborhood faded into towering iron gates and massive, sprawling wealth. We finally turned up a private hillside road looking down on the entire city. Heavy wrought iron gates parted without a sound, exposing grounds stretching forever into the dark. Then the mansion appeared. A massive modernist fortress built from glass, stone, and steel, brutal, heavy and yet undeniably elegant. Spotlights lit up terraced gardens and an infinity pool that just bled right into the skyline. We are here, the driver announced, braking hard at the grand entrance. Before I even reached for the handle, my door swung wide. I stepped out, smoothing my cheap dress, feeling hopelessly out of my depth. A brand new man in a suit rocking the exact same dangerous eyes as the driver gestured toward the door. This way, Miss Bennett. I followed him into a cavernous foyer. Soaring ceilings, stark minimalist furniture, and bare walls broken only by what had to be incredibly expensive modern art. The space should have felt completely sterile, but the low lighting and a faint scent of wood smoke made it surprisingly warm. Mr. Corelli will join you momentarily, the guard muttered, abandoning me in a vast sitting room. Please make yourself comfortable. Right, I sat rigidly on a white sofa, hands locked tight, through massive floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled out below, like a scattered handful of crushed diamonds. From up here, it looked small enough to crush in your fist. Maybe that was exactly how men like Enzo Corelli viewed the world, something manageable, entirely subject to his will. The view never gets old. I jolted at the sudden voice, spinning fast. Enzo stood casually leaning in the doorway. He moved like a literal ghost. I hadn't heard a single footstep. He wore a sharply tailored black suit. No tie collar popped open. That loose elegance somehow made the crime boss look even more lethal. It really is beautiful, I replied, forcing myself to stand up, suddenly hyper-aware of every breath. Every place the dress hugged my ribs. He closed the distance with that same quiet predator's grace. Dark eyes pinned to mine. Thank you for coming, Eleanor, as if I really had a choice. I held my tongue. I am still not clear why you need me here. Straight to business, he murmured, a slight smirk lifting the corner of his mouth. I appreciate that. He stepped closer, stopping so near I could breathe in that woodsy, terribly expensive scent. Close enough to see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the tiny amber flecks burning in his pitch-black eyes. I am hosting a small gathering tonight, close business associates. The kind of men who absolutely demand the finer things. Event coffee is always garbage. And I remembered how perfectly you brew mine. It felt totally insane that a guy like him went to these lengths for espresso, but I just nodded. How many guests? 12, including me. Nothing too crazy, just espresso, maybe a few cocktails for anyone who asks. Everything is ready in the kitchen. He gestured for me to walk with him. We moved deeper into the estate, stepping into a massive custom kitchen that would make a Michelin-starred chef break down and weep. Wall-to-wall steel and cold marble, built around an espresso machine that looked like high-end alien tech. An older woman was already working, arranging appetizers across heavy silver trays. She looked up, her expression utterly blank. Mr. Corelli, the first guests have arrived. Thank you. Maria, this is Eleanor. She is handling the coffee service tonight. Maria gave a short nod, sharp eyes scanning my dress. I set the station up. The Sicilian blend is clearly labeled. Enzo turned back. Maria will show you the ropes. I need to greet my guests. He paused, dark eyes lingering on me, just a second too long. That dress really suits you. Before I could even form a response, he walked out. Heat flared hot against my neck while Maria studied me. So you are the cafe girl, she murmured, her voice completely deadpan. I suppose I am. She nodded slow. Mr. Corelli is very particular about his coffee. He must have been deeply impressed. The way she dragged out that word made me wonder if we were actually talking about espresso anymore. But before I could spiral, she was already pulling me toward the machine, pointing out the imported beans and the delicate bone china. The guests stay in the main living room, she said, and out on the back terrace. They will come to you when they want a cup. Mr. Corelli hates when the staff hovers. Honestly, that was a huge relief. I really wasn't sure I could survive walking through Enzo's Mafia inner circle, holding a tray, terrified of spilling scalding water on silk suits that cost more than my entire life. As the hours dragged by, I found a steady rhythm, pulling shots and pouring Americanos for cold. Dangerous men who looked straight through me when they ordered. They kept their voices low, muttering about things I desperately pretended not to hear. Real estate deals that sounded exactly like extortion. Unmarked cargo shipments dropping next week. A local judge who suddenly saw reason on a nasty criminal case. From my station in the kitchen, I had a direct sightline into the living room. Enzo moved through the heavy hitters with quiet, lethal authority, barely speaking, yet dictating every single breath in the space. More than once, I caught him staring directly at me, face completely unreadable. Almost midnight hit before the final boss cleared out of the mansion. I was quietly wiping down the espresso machine when Enzo filled the kitchen doorway, loosening his collar with one hand, nursing a crystal glass of dark amber liquor in the other. Leave the rest, he told me, nodding toward the soapy ceramic cups. The day staff handles it. I dried my hands on a towel, suddenly hyper-aware of the heavy silence. I mentioned I should probably head home, asking if he could call the driver. Have a drink with me first. It wasn't a request. He was already pouring a second splash from a heavy crystal decanter. He asked if I was in a rush to get back. Back to what? A dead apartment, an empty bed. Another morning pouring coffee for nobodies, who barely knew I existed. No rush, I admitted, taking the heavy crystal glass from his hand. Come with me, he murmured. He led me down the long hall into a dark, wood-paneled study, bookshelves everywhere, a massive mahogany desk, and 2 heavy leather armchairs facing a fireplace where the embers still burned a fierce, angry red. He pointed to a chair, sank into the other, like a panther settling into the dark. "You did well tonight," he murmured, noting most people break a sweat around that crowd. I took a slow sip of the whiskey. It burned bright and ridiculously expensive all the way down. I told him they were not exactly keeping quiet about their racketeering anyway. The ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "And yet you never flinched, never asked a single question, never looked down on us." I told him it was not my place to judge. He just watched me over the rim of his glass. "Everyone judges, Eleanor," he said softly. "Most are just too weak to admit it." I stared right back into those pitch-black eyes. "Fine," I snapped. "But I know enough to realize the richest men always have the bloodiest money." I regretted the pushback the second it left my throat. You simply do not talk like that to a mafia boss. I was practically begging for a violent end, but instead of rage, a flicker of raw respect crossed his face. "Honesty," he murmured, "how completely refreshing." He pushed himself up from the heavy chair and walked over to the hearth, staring down into the dead ash. The orange light split his face in half. Shadows carved out the sharp angle of his jaw, the absolute. Quiet danger in his profile. He asked if I knew why he noticed me that first morning at the cafe. The question threw me completely off balance. I asked if it was just because I was not Sophia. He turned around, his eyes completely pitch black. "Because you were the only soul in that room not putting on an act," he said. "Students pretending to study, hustlers pretending to be rich, the staff pretending to care." He slowly closed the distance between us. "But you just moved right through the noise. No fake smile. Just pure exhaustion, stubborn grit, and absolute dignity." My throat went bone dry. It terrified me how easily he peeled back my layers. How closely this predator had been watching me all along. I whispered, "Why did you really drag me up here tonight?" He just stared for a long, heavy minute before setting his drink on the side table. "I am not entirely sure," he finally admitted. And right then, for the absolute first time, the boss of the Corelli family looked almost vulnerable. "Maybe I just wanted one real thing in a house full of liars." He reached out. His knuckles barely grazed my grandmother's silver bracelet. He murmured that it clearly meant a lot to me. I nodded, my skin burning from his sudden touch. "She raised me after my parents died," I told him. "A car crash when I was 8. The bracelet was all I had left after cancer took her 3 years back. And now you are entirely alone." It was a cold statement of fact. I shot back. "Yes," he whispered, locking onto my gaze. "I really believe you do." The air in the room suddenly turned suffocatingly heavy. A dangerous, magnetic gravity pulling us together. I stood up fast, desperate to put some physical space between us. I told him it was getting late. "I have to go," he nodded, taking a calculated step back as the cold mob boss masks slid right back over his face. "Of course. My driver is waiting for you." Walking down the massive hallway, I felt his body heat trailing right behind me, close, never making contact. At the heavy front door, I spun around. I thanked him formally for the work, using cheap manners as a shield against the absolute panic racing through my chest. He reached right past my shoulder to grip the brass handle. His arm grazed mine, sparking a violent shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with a night wind. "This does not have to be a one-time deal, Eleanor." He said he could use my specific skills on a weekly basis. There it was, that loaded double meaning vibrating between us like a cut power line. I found some reckless courage and asked him what exactly he was putting on the table. His gaze went pitch black. "A job for now, 3 days a week as my private barista, paying triple your current cafe wages." I asked if I would still be slinging coffee the other days. "If you want," he replied smoothly, "or you can belong exclusively to my payroll. The choice is yours." But it was a complete lie. Walking away meant never seeing him again, never feeling that lethal, high-voltage thrill that hijacked my pulse the second he walked into a room. My gut screamed at me to run far away, and yet I wanted him. I told him I needed to sleep on it, stalling for time, faking like I held any actual power in this dynamic. Then Enzo actually smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that stripped years off his face. He almost looked innocent, except for the ruthless predatory calculation glowing right behind his eyes. "Take all the time you need," he offered gently. But we both knew exactly how this ended. The town car was already idling in the driveway. As I tried to slip past him, his hand snapped out, wrapping gently around my wrist. His thumb rested right over my rapidly racing pulse. "There is one thing you really need to understand, Eleanor." His voice dropped to a rough whisper. "I do not form attachments. If you take this deal, Do not expect a single thing beyond the contract. I stared up into his eyes, saw the Mafia armor locking firmly back into place. He was warning me not to look for love in an active war zone. I understand, I told him, sounding far braver than I actually was. He finally let go. I marched toward the running engine without turning back. But I felt his heavy stare burning into my spine until the car melted into the blacked-out city streets. Streetlights smeared across the cold glass as we drove. I rubbed my wrist where his firm grip had been, my blood still hammering against my skin. I never wanted love from a man like Enzo Corelli. But whatever this twisted game of power and submission was, I was already drowning in it. Deep down, a quiet voice told me the terrifying truth. I never really had a choice to begin with. 3 days later, I took the job. Spent a long, agonizing night staring at a cracked ceiling, fighting basic survival instinct against sheer terror. Tripling my income meant actual safety. It meant finally stopping the brutal, exhausting math between rent and food. It meant surviving something other than my own poverty for the very first time. Or at least, that is the convenient lie I swallowed when I texted him my answer. I completely buried the real reasons. The way my chest tightened just picturing his face. That live-wire tension sparking every single time we spoke. The sick, pulling curiosity toward his violent crime family underworld. Barely 2 minutes after I hit send, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Just an address, and a strict time for tomorrow afternoon. No polite hello. No gloating that he won the game. Just cold coordinates and direct orders. Vintage Enzo. The address pulled me deep into the financial district, right to a brutalist tower of blinding glass and steel. A heavy-set guard in the lobby scrutinized my ID against a printed clipboard. Then he pointed me toward a private, locked-down elevator wired straight for the penthouse. Mr. Corelli is expecting you, the guard grunted, swiping a black key card into the polished brass panel. The doors shut without a single sound. Gravity pressed heavy against my boots as the cab rocketed to the top floor. The steel doors slid open, and I walked into a room completely alien to the warm, brooding shadows of his hillside estate. The mansion had heavy stone and fire. This place was pure ice, blinding white walls, slick concrete floors, couches that looked more like modern art than places to sit. Massive glass panels showed off the entire city skyline and the gray harbor far below. You are exactly on time. Enzo's rough voice cut from the shadows right behind me. I spun around. He was leaning against the frame of an open office door, tracking my every single move. His face gave absolutely nothing away. He wore sharp slacks and a pale blue shirt, sleeves pushed up to the elbows to expose thick, heavily scarred forearms. The dressed-down look did not fool me for a second. He still looked like a mob boss who could order a hit before breakfast. I told him I try not to waste people's time. Suddenly, I felt hyper-aware of my extremely simple outfit, dark jeans, and a forest green sweater that brought out my eyes. He had not given a dress code for today, so I just went with comfortable practicality. He nodded slowly. A highly valuable quality, he said. His eyes lingered on me for a second before he pointed toward an open-concept kitchen. He said he had everything set up to my personal preferences. I followed him, totally caught off guard. My preferences. He told me he asked Marco what equipment I favored at the cafe. Then he gestured to a professional-grade espresso machine, different from the setup at his mansion, but every bit as intense. He said this specific model should be to my liking. The sheer thoughtfulness of the gesture completely threw me. It was one thing to hire me for my skills, but entirely another, to track down the exact tools that made me comfortable. I thanked him, running my fingers lightly over the cold, polished metal of the machine. It was absolutely perfect. A flicker of real satisfaction crossed his sharp face. He told me this would be my primary workspace. He needed coffee in the mornings, and sometimes during private family meetings here, instead of the office. Then came the tour of the massive penthouse. He laid out exactly which areas were mine to use the kitchen, the main living area, the guest bathroom, the terrace, and which parts were strictly off limits. The master bedroom and his private office were completely out of bounds. The rules were crystal clear. I was hired help, not a house guest. Back in the sleek kitchen, he asked if I had any questions. I had dozens. Who are you, really? What kind of business demands this insane level of security? Why choose me? But I swallowed every single one of them. Instead, I just asked when he wanted his first coffee. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He told me now was good. A double espresso, splash of almond milk, Sicilian blend, sparkling water on the side. I cut him off, I remember. Something shifted in his dark eyes. Maybe approval, or maybe just shock that I actually memorized the order. I started prepping the coffee. feeling the absolute weight of his gaze, tracking every single move I made. That kind of heavy scrutiny should have made my hands shake. But strangely enough, I slipped right into the familiar routine. My muscles knew the exact rhythm, grinding the beans, tamping the grounds, watching that dark liquid extract. For a few seconds, I felt this weird surge of power. The penthouse was his, but this small corner of it was entirely mine. Behind that machine, I knew exactly what I was doing. I slid the cup and the sparkling water across the cold marble. He took a slow sip. His face gave absolutely nothing away. Perfect, he told me. One simple word of praise really shouldn't have mattered so much. It definitely shouldn't have sent a sudden rush of heat straight through my chest. But it did. Over the next few weeks, we actually fell into a rhythm. 3 mornings a week. I showed up right at 9. Sometimes Enzo was waiting. Other times he was gone, leaving strict orders with his security detail. Whenever he stayed, he usually dragged his paperwork out to the main dining table, instead of locking himself away in his office. Close enough to share the same air, but far enough to avoid forced small talk. Every now and then, he threw a random question my way. Easy stuff at first, the weather, some bleak headline in the paper. But slowly, he started digging deeper. He wanted to know where I went to school, what I majored in. I told him English literature, a violently expensive degree that got me absolutely nowhere. He asked if I had family nearby. I told him no, not a single soul since my grandmother died. In return, he fed me tiny fragments of his own life, jagged puzzle pieces that refused to connect. Born in Sicily, brought over as a boy, fluent in 5 languages, demanded total silence while working. He skipped breakfast entirely, but never missed lunch. The man devoured books, history, philosophy, classic literature. His shelves were packed with battered spines, not just expensive showpieces. And yet, I never learned a single concrete fact about how he actually made his money. The phone would ring. If it was important, he switched to rapid Italian. Then the heavy office door would slam shut. Heavy men with dead eyes visited sometimes. They tracked my every move until Enzo brushed me off as just Eleanor, his barista. Then came the sudden disappearances. Whole days he vanished without a trace, only to return with split skin across his knuckles. A dangerous, coiled energy lived in his jaw right up, until I set that dark cup of coffee in front of him. I never asked about the blood. It really wasn't my place. I was just the girl who made his espresso. I repeated that lie to myself, staring at the ceiling late at night, trying to forget the electric jolt when our fingers brushed over a porcelain cup, or the rare times I actually got him to laugh. That deep, rough sound completely altered his face, only to vanish a second later, like he realized he slipped up and let the armor crack. A month into the job, I walked into an empty penthouse. Only Maria was around, the quiet housekeeper I first met at the main Corelli estate. She watched me prime the espresso machine. Mr. Corelli got pulled into an early meeting, she explained, but he left strict orders. He would be back by noon, and he fully expected me to have his lunch ready. The shock must have been written all over my face. I told her he never said a word about me cooking. Maria gave me a small, pitying look. She told me not to panic. The food was already sitting right there in the fridge. I just had to heat and plate it. She had to rush back to the main house to intercept a delivery. Once she left, I pulled open the fridge, just like she promised. A container of fresh pasta and rich red sauce sat waiting on the glass shelf. Easy enough. I killed the morning, wiping down spotless marble counters, then started drifting along the living room bookshelves. Enzo kept a wild mix. Biographies of dead kings, thick philosophical texts in 4 languages, and weirdly enough, an entire row of poetry spanning centuries. I got completely lost in a battered edition of Neruda. I never even heard the front door open. The only warning I got was that sudden, heavy prickle at the back of my neck. I snapped my head up. Enzo was leaning in the doorway, studying me, his face an absolute stone wall. He nodded at the book in my grip, noting I had good taste. Neruda understood desire better than most, he told me. My face burned hot. I shoved the volume back into its slot, stammering out that I was just killing time. I quickly reminded him Maria said he wanted lunch. Enzo tracked me into the kitchen, shrugging off his dark suit jacket and leaving it over a dining chair. He confirmed he had another sit-down later that afternoon. Restaurants were too risky when real business was on the table, he said. I just nodded, turning my back to heat the pasta and that thick sauce. Every second I worked, his gaze felt heavier, stifling. When I finally risked a look, he was leaning on the marble right beside me, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie ripped loose. He noted how comfortable I looked in his space. I kept my eyes on the tongs and shrugged. I told him the routine was nice. Then he asked about my other job at the cafe. I admitted. I still worked there 2 days a week, my desperate anchor to reality. A world where men didn't require armed guards, shadow corporations, and fortified penthouse apartments. When I added that Marco had been great about my reduced hours, Enzo let out a dry, hollow laugh that made my blood freeze. He figured Marco would be given the circumstances. The sheer ice in his voice made me stop moving entirely. I asked him what circumstances. Enzo weighed me with his eyes for a long second, then dropped the bomb. Marco Delgado had been paying protection money to the Ricci family for years. He figured once Marco realized I belonged to him. The cafe owner suddenly found the motivation to be flexible. Enzo stated this like he was reading the morning weather. The utter casualness of it sent a brutal chill straight down my spine, not because Marco was being extorted, but because of what those words finally confirmed, about the man standing right next to me, the Ricci family. I repeated the name slowly, asking if they were his competitors. The muscles in his broad shoulders locked. In a manner of speaking, he replied. I slammed the plate down on the granite. I demanded to know what he was actually confirming. Was he a mafia boss? His jaw clenched hard. He called himself a businessman with diverse interests. I snapped back, asking if that was the new corporate term for extortion. I regretted it instantly. A lethal stillness washed over the kitchen. His dark eyes went completely cold. For the first time, pure fear spiked in my chest. He warned me to be careful, his voice dropping to a whisper wrapped in razor wire. There were questions I didn't want answered, he said. I should have backed away, apologized, served his food. I should have retreated to my safe little box as the silent barista. But something fractured inside me. I was sick of the polite charade. I told him I actually wanted answers. My own reckless nerve terrified me, but I pushed harder. If I took a paycheck from a mobster, I had a right to know. He moved so fast it blurred. In half a second, he closed the gap, his large hand snapping up to grip my jaw. The hold wasn't brutal, but it was absolute iron. He forced me to look directly into his eyes, speaking in a terrifyingly calm voice. He told me I had a highly paid job that required discretion and good coffee, nothing else. Panic should have crushed my lungs. Instead, that heavy, electric current between us just flared, raw danger and sheer attraction twisting into a knot I couldn't undo. I whispered that, if he really meant that, he never would have brought me here twice. His thumb grazed my lower lip, barely a brush. Perhaps I made a mistake. He murmured. Did you? I asked him. We stood completely frozen. His gaze dropped down to my mouth. I wanted it. I feared it. Instead, he let go, stepped back. The iron mask slammed right back onto his face. Enjoy your afternoon off. Eleanor, he snapped. I will see you tomorrow. A brutal dismissal. I grabbed my bag, fought the violent shaking in my hands, and the heat burning my neck. At the elevator, I looked back. He stood framed by the skyline, a dark, lonely monument of power. I told him that for what it was worth. I still didn't judge him. He turned, shock breaking through his composure for half a second. Perhaps you should, he said. The steel doors closed. I hit the back wall, pulse hammering against my ribs. I had just challenged a ghost who made bodies disappear, a monster who explicitly warned me not to look for love. And yet I was falling for him anyway. Complete suicide. The next morning, I just stared at the ceiling. I could just quit, find another cafe, go back to my boring, invisible life of scraping by. Instead, I was in his private elevator again, riding up to the penthouse, up to him. The doors parted to a completely silent, empty room. I called out for Enzo, stepping carefully inside. Absolute silence. Relief slammed hard into disappointment. I walked toward the kitchen to start the coffee. Then I saw it. A heavy envelope left on the marble counter, Eleanor, written in his sharp scrawl. Inside sat a sealed packet and a single note. It said he was called away on urgent business. Unreachable for days. The instructions read, deliver this packet to the address below. Today, 2 p.m. Come alone. I stared at the street name, the roughest part of the city, flipped the heavy envelope over. Blank, except for a blood-red wax seal stamped with that same ornate C. This was not my job. I poured espresso. I did not run errands for the mob. This crossed the line from staff straight to accomplice. I should have tossed it and walked away. Instead, at 1:45, I sat in the back of a cab speeding toward Enzo's mysterious address. The streets turned gritty fast, broken concrete and peeling paint everywhere. The cab stopped outside a battered brick building. A faded neon sign read Bella Note above a dark restaurant front. The driver turned around, asking if I was sure this was the right spot. I double-checked the note. I told him yes, paid the cash, stepped out, and gripped the envelope tight inside my coat. The restaurant looked completely dead, even with the open sign swinging. I pushed inside. Heavy garlic, rich tomato, and faint string music hit me. A massive guy glared from the register. He sized me up, told me they were closed for a private party. I stood taller, said I had a delivery for the owner, sent directly by Enzo Corelli. The man froze. His entire posture dropped. He muttered that they were expecting me, leading me toward a heavy back door. An old man sat in a cramped office, buried under cash ledgers, paper skin, but his eyes were pure steel. They locked onto me, so he rasped, "You are Corelli's girl." His accent was thick. I firmly told him I was just his barista. I desperately needed that boundary. He just smiled, deep lines cutting into his cheeks, and asked for the package. I handed it over. He snapped the wax seal, pulled out heavy legal papers. I watched his eyes track the ink. The suspicion slowly morphed into sheer respect. "Tell Enzo that old Giuseppe agrees to his terms," he muttered, folding the paper. "And tell him his taste in messengers is completely unexpected." I nodded, desperate to get out. My hand hit the doorknob. Then the old man called out, warning me to be careful. He warned that Enzo never gives his heart away easily, if at all. Enzo's own threat echoed in my head, "Don't expect love." I told Giuseppe I knew exactly who I was dealing with. The boss flashed a gold tooth, chuckled, said I didn't know a thing. Then 3 agonizing days of radio silence. By day 3, my stomach was in tight knots. Not over the job. Over him. Was he even alive? The paranoia was eating me alive. I was packing up that afternoon when my phone finally buzzed. An unknown number. It just read roof now. I knew it was Enzo, though how he tracked my personal number was terrifying. Hands shaking, I rode the elevator up, pushed through the fire doors. The entire city spilled out below, drenched in the brutal gold of late afternoon. And there he was, Enzo, standing at the edge of the garden, back turned, staring down the skyline. His spine was rigid steel. His shoulders carried the weight of a war. I called his name softly. He turned around. I physically choked back a gasp. A vicious bruise covered his left cheekbone. His lower lip was split wide open. He tried hiding it under a custom suit, but the violence was obvious. I stepped closer, asking what happened. "A business disagreement," he muttered. Pure deflection. He just stared, asking if I delivered the package. I nodded. I told him Giuseppe agreed to the demands, but found his choice of messenger pretty strange. A spark of amusement hit his eyes. Giuseppe was always sharp, he noted. He told me to sit. I sank into the chair opposite him. He poured the wine blood red, catching the dying sun. I took the glass, telling him he took a massive risk, sending me into Giuseppe's territory. "Yes," he replied. No apology. I demanded to know why me. Giuseppe would never trust my men, he explained. The old crime family's worship tradition. A personal envoy hits harder than a street thug. And that is what I am. I shot back. "Your personal envoy." His eyes went totally dark. "Among other things," he murmured. I downed half my glass to stop shaking. I confessed I thought he might not come back after our last fight. He asked if it was because I called him a criminal to his face. A ghost of a smile touched his split lip. Very few have the nerve to speak to me like that. I asked if I was just his amusement. No. He said I was still here because I was excellent, discreet, because I ran his package into the underworld without hesitating, even knowing what he was. "So what are you?" I pushed, he set his wine down slowly. "You have already decided what I am." He was right. But Mafia boss felt wrong now. Way too simple. Not for this man with his tragic eyes. "The Corelli family," I said slowly. "You inherited this empire from your father." "My uncle," he corrected softly. "My dad died when I was 12. My uncle took me in, groomed me. When he died 5 years ago, I took the throne." I asked if he actually wanted the crown. A heavy shadow fell across his bruised face. "Wanting it means absolutely nothing," he whispered. "It was a blood duty." I pressed him if you could rip it up and choose again. "Would you?" He stayed perfectly quiet, staring out at the burning skyline. "A long time ago," he murmured. "I thought I might teach literature. I was 19, sophomore year. A professor swore I had real potential. That image completely knocked the wind out of me. Enzo Corelli, standing in a classroom. I softly asked what went wrong. My cousin Matteo was butchered. He said flatly, "A hit ordered by the Ricci family." His tone was ice, but his knuckles went bone white around his glass. I dropped out the very next morning. Some choices aren't choices at all. The crushing weight of that reality locked us in. The terrifying mob boss vanished. I just saw a trapped man, bleeding out for a family curse. just like I was trapped by my parents dying, my grandmother's sickness, the financial walls closing in. I told him softly I was sorry. He shot me a sharp look, telling me not to pity him. Eleanor, he had made peace with who he was. Had I really? The question hung there, completely unanswered. The sun was setting now, bleeding orange and purple across the sky. Enzo refilled our glasses, his movements precise. I changed the subject, asking about Giuseppe. Who was he to him? A ghost of a smile touched Enzo's lips. Giuseppe was his uncle's consigliere, retired now, but he still holds major influence with the old families. His blessing carries serious weight. His blessing for what? I asked. Enzo met my eyes, his gaze intense. For change, he said. The old Mafia ways were dying. The protection rackets, the endless vendettas, totally unsustainable now. He had been working hard to legitimize their business, to build something that could actually survive. But the Ricci family completely rejects that vision. His expression darkened. Antonio Ricci is old school. The man sees these efforts as weakness, a betrayal of their tradition. Enzo absently touched his bruised cheek, noting that Ricci made his opinion quite clear during their recent sit-down. I had to fight the urge to reach across the table and touch that injury myself. I asked if that was why he sent the envelope to Giuseppe, rallying support against Ricci. Enzo studied me with new appreciation, calling me very perceptive. I tried keeping it light, joking that I read a lot of mystery novels. That earned me a rare, genuine laugh that completely transformed his face. Real dimples. That sound did something to my insides, a warm flutter that had absolutely nothing to do with the wine. He told me there was more to me than meets the eye. His voice held something that almost felt like affection. I told him I could say the exact same about him. Our eyes locked. I thought he might actually reach for me. Instead, he pushed his chair back and walked to the edge of the roof. He stared out at the city lights in the gathering dusk. I followed, stood right beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his body. I asked him softly why he really hired me. He stayed silent so long. I thought he'd ignore the question. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, intimate. From the moment he saw me in that cafe, he knew I was different, a strength he rarely sees. He turned to face me, eyes burning in the fading daylight. He said I looked at him without fear, without any artifice. Did I have any idea how incredibly rare that was in his world? My breath caught. I asked if that was why he kept me so far away, just because I wasn't afraid. He told me he kept his distance because he had to. His hand came up, fingers hovering inches from my cheek. Men like him do not get normal connections, he murmured. Everything he touches turns complicated. It turns dangerous. I whispered that maybe I did not want normal. My heart pounded hard against my ribs. Maybe I decided that the exact day I took his job offer. Something finally shifted in his expression. That rigid control slipped, exposing a dark hunger that perfectly mirrored my own. Slowly, deliberately, he closed the last few inches between us. His hand finally found my cheek warm and slightly rough against my skin. He murmured for me to tell him to stop. His face hovered inches from mine, daring me to say this was not what I wanted. I didn't answer. I just rose on my toes and pressed my lips to his. For one agonizing heartbeat, he stayed completely still. Panic flared. I was terrified I had misread this entirely. Then his arms clamped around me, pulling me hard against his chest as he took over the kiss. It was absolutely nothing, like I had pictured on all those lonely nights in my apartment. This was not gentle. It wasn't hesitant. It was totally consuming, a violent clash of desire, denied for way too long. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling my head back for better access. I dug my fingers into his shoulders, feeling the solid, dangerous strength underneath that expensive suit. Pure, barely contained power. When we finally broke apart, chests heaving, he dropped his forehead right against mine. His voice was raspy, as he muttered that this complicated absolutely everything. I told him I knew. His thumb brushed over my lower lip. He warned me not to expect love from him, and I told him I remembered the rules. He swore he could never give me what normal men provide: safety, stability, or a future without shadows. I held his gaze without flinching. I told him I was not asking for any of that. He studied my face, desperately searching for the lie in my eyes. Whatever he found made him drag me even closer. His arms locked around me as he buried his face in my neck. He whispered, almost to himself, that I deserved so much better than him. I told him to let me decide what I deserve. We stood there for a long time, just anchored to each other. The city lights burned below us in the dark. I felt the heavy, steady thud of his heart against my cheek. For the first time since the day we met, the Mafia boss seemed truly at peace. But it couldn't last. In his world, nothing perfect ever does. The brutal ring of a cell phone shattered the quiet. Enzo stiffened. He let go of me to pull the phone from his pocket, and his jaw locked the second he checked the screen. He said he had to take this. He was already stepping back, transforming instantly into the cold, distant mob boss I first met. I wrapped my arms around my ribs, suddenly freezing the second he pulled away. He paced away, firing off rapid Italian into the receiver. His tone was low and vicious, his free hand curled into a tight fist. When he finally hung up, he kept his back to me for a few agonizing seconds. His shoulders were like stone. Then he turned around, and that absolute mask was firmly back in place. He told me he had to leave. Strictly business. A situation required his immediate attention. I called his name, but he just threw up a hand to silence me. He declared this whole evening was a mistake. Eleanor, a lapse in judgment that could never be repeated. That hit me right in the chest. I told him he didn't mean it, but he swore he did. Refusing to even look at me, he blamed it all on momentary weakness. I asked if one kiss really had him running scared. His eyes went pitch black. He wasn't running, he snapped. He was protecting me. From what? I demanded. From him, from his violent life. He dragged a hand through his hair, a rare crack of frustration breaking his flawless composure. Did I have any idea what would happen if Antonio Ricci found out he had feelings for me? I would instantly become a target, just a pawn to bleed him out. I argued right back that I could handle myself. No, he fired back. I couldn't. Not against ruthless mobsters like Ricci. He stepped in fast, gripping my arms hard. The things he had seen. Eleanor, the brutal things he had personally done. I had absolutely no concept of how dark his world really was. Then show me. I challenged him. I begged him to stop shutting me out. For one split second, I really thought I had broken through. Something in his harsh stare softened. It wavered. Then the phone vibrated in his pocket again. The moment shattered. He told me to go home, his tone entirely dead. Take a few days off. Eleanor. He said he would call when he needed coffee again. Just like that. I was slammed right back into my place as the barista. Nothing more. I stood completely still, waiting until he vanished through the heavy roof door. Only then did I let the tears fall. They fell in silence, carried off by the cold breeze while the city lights blurred into streaks below. I didn't hear a single word from Enzo for an entire week. No texts, no calls. Absolutely nothing. I swung between burning anger and crushing heartache, replaying that kiss over and over while cursing his stubborn pride. I just went back to pulling full shifts at the cafe, ignoring Marco's lingering looks. I dodged every question about why I was suddenly so available. 8 days of dead air. I dragged myself back to my apartment after a brutally long shift, exhausted to my bones. A thick envelope sat on the floor, slipped right under my door. No name, no return address. Just that heavy wax seal stamped with an ornate C. Inside was a first-class plane ticket to Sicily, leaving the very next night. It was wrapped in a brief note, scrawled in Enzo's bold handwriting. The message was short. His grandmother's villa in Taormina. A car would collect me at 6 p.m. 1 week, no strings. No expectations. Just come. My hands visibly shook as I read the words a second time. Then a third. What kind of twisted game was this? After shoving me away so brutally. After icing me out on that roof. Now the boss wanted me flying across the globe to his hideout. I knew I should refuse. I should have torn that ticket to shreds, sending a clear message that I wasn't some toy he could toss aside. Instead, I found myself zipping up a duffel bag, my heart hammering with a sick mix of anticipation and dread. The black car idled at the curb at exactly 6 p.m. The driver was a stranger, but he had those same dead, watchful eyes as all of Enzo's men. He shoved my suitcase into the trunk without speaking a single word. At the airport, I bypassed the main terminal entirely. They whisked me through a private checkpoint and straight onto a luxury jet, skipping the commercial flight printed on my ticket entirely. That was Enzo flexing his power, buying total secrecy. The flight over the Atlantic was just a feverish blur of frayed nerves and bone-deep exhaustion. I had barely slept. I just tossed and turned, violently second-guessing my choice to get on that plane. By the time the jet finally touched down in Sicily, the early Mediterranean sun was bleeding over the horizon, washing the island in warm amber. Another car sat idling right on the tarmac, a sleek armored black Mercedes with heavy tinted windows. Winding coastal roads, jagged mountains left, sparkling sea right. The Mercedes turns up a private drive lined with cypress trees, stopping at a sprawling stone estate built into the cliffs. No cold glass or steel like Enzo's penthouses, just old-world stone and terracotta. An ancient stronghold, a place heavily soaked in generations of blood, whispered secrets, and quiet grief. The massive oak door swings open before I even knock. not Enzo. An older woman with silver-streaked hair stands there, taking my measure in a single, surgical glance. Miss Bennet, she says through a heavy accent. Welcome to Villa Corelli. I am Sophia. I follow her into a chilled stone foyer, the air thick with the scent of cut lilies. I ask if Enzo is here. Sophia doesn't even blink. Mr. Corelli asks that you make yourself comfortable, she replies. He will join you tonight. She waves a wrinkled hand toward the sweeping staircase, leading me up. The bedroom is massive. Floor-to-ceiling glass doors stand wide open, spilling out onto a private stone terrace that hangs right over the ocean. The bed sheets feel like ice water against my skin. Someone placed fresh wildflowers on the nightstand. After I shower, I find a tray waiting on the terrace. Warm pastries, sliced fruit, an espresso strong enough to wake the dead. I eat in total silence, watching the Mediterranean bruise into twilight. In the distance, the jagged shadow of Mount Etna looms over everything. The long afternoon drifts by like a fever dream. I wander the tiered gardens. I sleep beneath an ancient olive tree. I flip through dusty books in the library. But my stomach stays twisted in knots. The waiting is an actual, physical ache. Then just as the sun drops and bleeds crimson across the water, I feel it. That familiar prickle at the base of my neck. I turn around. Enzo stands in the doorway, perfectly framed by the fading light. Loose linen trousers, a white shirt, unbuttoned at the throat. He looks totally stripped down, completely unguarded. The violent bruise on his jaw has faded into a sick, yellowish shadow. He looks exhausted, yet beautiful enough to ruin a life. You came, he says softly. I grip the stone railing. Did you think I wouldn't? Honestly, I almost didn't, not after how you cut me loose on that roof. I hear his boots on the tile, the sudden heat of his body right behind me. He whispers that he is not good at this, Eleanor. At what? I ask. Letting anyone in. He mutters. The words look painful to say, admitting I bleed like anyone else. My entire life. Attachment meant death. Caring put a target on your back. I turn around. He stands inches away. Then why am I here? He lifts a hand, rough fingers brushing hair from my cheek. Because I just cannot stay away. Believe me, I tried. The confession hangs in the salty Mediterranean air, completely stripped of his usual armor. So what changed? I ask. I did, he whispers. His thumb drags across my lower lip. You gutted me, made me question everything. I thought I knew about myself, about what I actually want. And what do you want? Enzo, his dark eyes lock onto mine, absolutely unblinking. You, only you. Eleanor, he leans in. This kiss is not desperate. It lacks the drowning hunger of that first time. It is terrifyingly slow. His hands cradle my jaw like I am something fragile, something he wants to worship instead of break. He pulls back just enough to rest his forehead against mine. I brought you here because this is the only dirt on earth where I am just me, not the boss, not the Corelli hair, just Enzo. And who is that? I ask. A small, cracked smile touches his face. I am still figuring it out. Help me discover him. The sky goes pitch black. Mediterranean stars cut through the dark. He takes my hand and leads me inside. That night, with the heavy scent of jasmine blowing through the sheer curtains, Enzo Corelli drops every single shield. He shows me the bleeding, breathing man buried beneath the monster. The man who once ordered me to never expect love had already surrendered his entire heart. He just didn't know the words yet. Dawn bleeds through the windows. We lie tangled in warm sheets. He traces my collarbone, his face finally stripped of all shadows. Stay with me, he whispers against my skin. Not just for the week, not as my barista. Stay. I stare at the ceiling, thinking of my empty apartment. The grinding cafe shifts, that hollow grief since my grandmother died. Then I look at him. His world is a loaded gun, but it is alive. One condition, I tell him, meeting his heavy gaze. Name it, no more freezing me out. When the blood spills, you do not push me away. His jaw tightens. My world is lethal. Eleanor, sometimes putting walls up is the only way you survive. I shake my head. I don't need a bodyguard. I need a partner. If I stay, I am not a pet in a gilded cage. I am your equal. He goes perfectly still. His thumb stops tracing my skin. He stares at me for a long time, weighing the cost. Then a slow nod. Equal partners, he swears. His voice is thick as blood. No more lies. The morning sun climbs higher, flooding the stone room in brilliant gold. The ruthless boss who warned me off is handing me the keys to his life. And I, the girl who spent her whole life invisible, am finally stepping out of the shadows. Wide awake. The Corelli Empire will bring war. That is a given. But whatever comes, we face the fire together. Not as a cartel boss and a girl pouring coffee. As equals. I press my mouth to his shoulder. Yes, I tell him. I will stay. And the last wall shatters. Just us. Building a future neither of us saw coming on that ordinary morning when a simple espresso order derailed both our lives forever.